Financial leadership is changing. CFOs no longer record history. They make history. This podcast will help you become a better leader, strategic thinker, and digital visionary. Welcome to Secrets of Rockstar CFOs, the ultimate podcast for chief financial officers. Follow along as Jack McCullough engages in exciting chats with accomplished CFOs, learning how they overcame obstacles and positioned their companies for the future. Here's your host, Jack McCullough.
Hello, Rockstars, and welcome to the Secrets of Rockstar CFOs. I'm your host, Jack McCullough, and I'm thrilled to have you here. You can follow us online at rockstarcfos.com. A big shout out to our sponsors, Plantful and the CFO Leadership Council, for making this podcast possible. Let's dive into a great episode. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Secrets of Rockstar CFOs. I'm Jack McCullough, and my day job is the president of the CFO Leadership Council. And today we truly have a rockstar CFO. Pascal Desroches is the CFO of AT&T. His full title is Senior Executive Vice President and Chief Financial Officer. And he and his team oversee the financial strategy for AT&T's $122 billion connectivity business. Pascal, welcome to the Secrets of Rockstar CFOs.
Jack, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to our discussion.
That's great. And I had never heard of AT&T till I started talking to your team. And I guess you're a startup in the Houston, Texas area. For those listeners who don't know me, that was my attempt at sarcasm. Obviously, one of the great companies and great brands. But, you know, I think everybody's familiar with your company, but it's gone through such a, amazing transformation the last few years. Do you think you could give like a 10,000-foot overview on the modern AT&T?
Sure thing. Look, I think it was under the prior administration, AT&T had expanded beyond traditional telecommunication. Of course, we had a big wireless and big broadband business, but we had acquired a big television satellite company, DirecTV, and the Time Warner Media properties, which ironically is where I joined the company because I was a longtime executive at Time Warner. And so when I joined as the CFO, AT&T was trying to really reshape the company. And the goal was to, I think John's goal was very clear. We had a company that was heavily, that had a lot of indebtedness, over $150 billion of debt. We had $15 billion annual dividend obligation. We had three big businesses that all needed significant investment to reignite growth. And so we understood that something had to change. And John made bold moves to reshape the company and really go back to the historic telecommunication roots of AT&T. So we separated our DirecTV business. We separated the Time Warner businesses. We had to make the very difficult decision of reducing our dividend. And we undertook a significant plan to deleverage the company. All those things together get us to where we are today. We are a company that has reduced its debt by over $40 billion. And at the same time, this is a company that is growing earnings, growing revenues, subscribers, cash. And we're doing all this while investing significantly in American telecommunication infrastructure. During John Stankey's tenure as CEO, we have invested over $100 billion back into American telecom infrastructure, including nearly $40 billion in spectrum acquisitions that we did in 2021. So we've, in a fairly short period of time, we've really totally repositioned AT&T back to its roots, to one of the great telecommunication companies in the world.
Yeah, I mean, it's remarkable. When I think of the biggest transformations of, the last decade, say, it's, I'd struggle to come up with anything more than what you have executed the last few years. So, good for you. And It's funny because when I was a CFO, I was with startup companies. So, the biggest company I was a CFO for did about 100 million in revenue. So the numbers that you're tossing around, they seem almost like something out of science fiction to me, but it just shows how big the scope of AT&T is and what an impact it makes, not only in all of our daily lives, but the global economy generally when you're that big.
It is indeed. We are such a critical part of global communication infrastructure. And, with that comes an enormous responsibility to ensure that we are investing to have the absolute best connectivity in the world. And we are incredibly proud of what we've done to reposition the company the last several years.
Yeah, that's fantastic. We'll definitely talk about that later. But before we get into that, I want to talk about your personal background a little bit. And I know that you immigrated from Haiti when you were a child. And can you tell us a little about that experience and where you settled and those things?
Sure thing. Look, I don't remember all the details vividly. I was only 5 when I immigrated here, but it is truly a great American story. My parents came here in their late 30s with 4 kids, ranging in age from 10 to 2, and I was 5. So I was the third of number 3 of 4, so the second youngest. And we lived first in Brooklyn, then in Queens. And look, we were a typical New York immigrant family. There are quite a few of them in New York. And we grew up in a neighborhood that was pretty much middle class and, trying to make our way to the American dream. I went to New York City public high schools, got my undergraduate degree in accounting from St. John's University. And I started my career after graduation at what was then Pete Mark Mitchell, that is now KPMG.
I knew there was something about you I liked. I started my career at Pete Marwick and Mitchell too. So
absolutely. Yeah. So I spent in total 12 years there. Part of it, most of it was in the audit practice, the New York operating office, but I also spent 3 years in their national office. And during my time at KPMG, I had the opportunity to be awarded a fellowship with the Securities and Exchange Commission, where I was a professional accounting fellow with the Office of the Chief Accountant. And so, ironically, that opportunity led to my current role here at AT&T, and I'll take you through that path shortly. Because the controller of Time Warner was also a former fellow. And so I interacted with him briefly. He took a liking to me, and ultimately that led to my joining Time Warner. And when Time Warner got acquired by AT&T, ultimately that's how I got here. But in terms of other career highlights, I also, during my time at KPMG, they sponsored me for an MBA at Columbia University. And so I got an MBA concentration in corporate finance and organizational behavior. And so over the course of my time at KPMG, ironically, I didn't work on telecommunication. I worked on healthcare and financial institutions.
Wow, that is quite a run that you had, to say the least. So I'm curious, if I may ask, when were you at Pete Marwick and Mitchell?
I was there from 1986. I left in 98, came back in 2000, middle of 2000. And then I ultimately left the firm again in 2001. I left in 98 through 2000 for the SEC fellowship.
Got it. That's interesting. So apparently we're the same age. I was there from 86 to 90. So
okay, which office?
I was in Boston.
Okay.
So we probably met at one of those world-class training things in Phoenix, Arizona, or Scottsdale, Arizona. They actually used to go to. So we probably met briefly at those. It's funny. I didn't like Boston people had a reputation which we upheld, but we didn't do the advanced prep for those sorts of programs. Like we'd show up first day and we'd be taking the plastic off the binder. So I'm not sure what was wrong with us, but for some reason we had a reputation. And it was one of those reputations that it turns out were well deserved. So
the New York office was not much better.
Interesting. So But so I wanted to chat a little about, just going back to your childhood. One of your colleagues shared with me that you learned to speak English from the local church. And
Yeah.
I'm curious, what that was like. And again, I know you were pretty young at the time and, not the only one coming to New York where English was the second language, but what that was like and how that maybe changed who you are.
Well, look, here is, you think back, this is why I am so incredibly proud of my parents. And I always say, no matter what I accomplish professionally, it will pale in comparison to what my parents did and the courage it took to immigrate to a country where they didn't know the language. And we all had to learn the language while going to school full time. So at 5 years old, I was going into kindergarten, and my younger brother was just born. And we had to, in addition to our normal classes, we had to go and actually learn English as a second language through our local church, which provided that as an option for, it was principally adults, but it also we also had access to it as children. And so look, school was incredibly difficult in those early years because you had to overcome the language barrier. And I remember having the teachers having to pull me out and actually work through reading and making sure that I understood how to read in English. So those are things that help you really gain a degree of confidence in your ability to overcome challenges and obstacles. And so that still sticks out in my mind, even though, it's more than 50 years later.
Yeah, it's crazy because, I grew up in the suburbs and there weren't a lot of people who were born outside the United States and came that weren't fluent in English. But, they were, we had our share. And I always just thought it was remarkable that they could pass the classes at all. Because, I can't imagine if I went to Japan or India, where a lot of my classmates and friends were from, how would I be able to pass a test in Japanese while I'm learning the language, right? It's just, to me, it's one of the most remarkable things. And your siblings, you had two of them a little bit older than you, so it's probably a little bit harder on them, perhaps. But
it was much harder for them. Me and my younger brother had it a little bit easier because, look, we didn't have as much built-in history with French and Creole, which is also spoken in Haiti.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. But so it's an incredible, you are truly like the American dream type of success story to imagine that 5-year-old being the CFO of one of the most iconic and most important companies in all the world. It's just a remarkable story.
And Jack, I will tell you this, I look back, my younger brother is the president of Rice University. So when I think about my parents and what they managed to accomplish in coming to the US and making all the sacrifices that they did, it's pretty remarkable. And there is no other place in the world where a story like ours is even remotely possible.
Wow, your brother is the president of a prestigious university. That's pretty cool. So good for him. So great. But I want to get back to a little about your career path. And you've certainly worked with some of the best known companies in the world at Time Warner, Turner Broadcasting, KPMG. So what were some of the valuable lessons that you learned along the way to prepare you for this role of a Fortune 20 company? And who are the key mentors that you had? Because I've met very few people that didn't have mentors. And often the mentor doesn't even know that he or she served in that role.
Yeah, I've had so many of them over the years, but I'll give you an example. Dick Parsons, CEO of Time Warner, longtime CEO of Time Warner, was a mentor. Jeff Bewkes, also former CEO of Time Warner, was a mentor. Our CEO of Turner Broadcasting, a fellow by the name of John Martin, was a mentor. And obviously, John Stankey is a mentor. Here are some of the things that I would tell you that thinking about Dick Parsons, for example, one of the things that I really, really admired about Dick was he made it safe psychologically to problem solve with him. he was an attentive listener. When he started to ask questions that were counter to your point of view, he would say, keep going. I want to hear the counterpoint. I want to make sure my understanding is complete. So he created a psychological safety that was, in my mind, critical to world-class problems. And I think all too often, you have leaders who come in and they know the answer without really fully understanding the problem. Dick and also Jeff Bupkis were the types of leaders that really wanted to understand fully the opposing view before reaching their own judgment.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Another trait that I really admire about Parsons in particular is he's like, look, we have to be very comfortable in living in ambiguity. Very few problems that we're going to have to solve are going to be clear. So the ability to have deliberate debate and be comfortable coming out of the other side that our calculus may not be right, but we went through the right process is something that I think is also something that I learned and I try to emulate in my leadership. And that it's often commented that I never get overly excited no matter what's at stake. I'm usually pretty calm, cool, collected. And it comes from those experiences where you say, hey, if you follow the right process, you have to feel that the outcome, even if it doesn't go your way, you've done your best to put the company in the best possible position.
Yeah, that's the name of the game. It's interesting what you said about like some bosses sort of just, they walk in knowing all the answers and they don't listen to their team. And, talk about self-limiting behavior. If they got to a CEO role, they're probably very talented, but they're putting a ceiling on how successful they can be if they're just relying on their own perspective and experience and whatnot. It seems like they're doing themselves and their companies a disservice to lead like that.
Indeed. I agree. It's like, by definition, the higher you go up, the more it's really critical that you listen, because you are not going to be intimate with the facts as the people who are directly involved in day to day. So,
yeah, it's amazing. I worked when I wrote a book on psychopathic leaders a couple of years ago, and I interviewed a lot of CFOs for it. It was specifically about psychopathic CEOs, which unfortunately there are more of them than you might think. But one person shared with me that it was with a PE-backed company doing very well. They replaced the founder, who became the CTO or VP of engineering. They brought in an outside to be the CEO. And the very first day, he basically, as she told the story, he basically said, I don't really need a lot of input. I know exactly what I want to do. I know where we need to take this company. So I'll ask you questions, but, I don't really necessarily want to hear your opinions. It's like, even if you're sort of thinking that, what a way to introduce yourself to the team, right? And he's like, by the way, if you don't like it, thanks for your service. You can turn in your resignation. So, yeah. He just wanted it to be around a lot of yes men and yes women. But you're blessed to have leaders like that shape your career path, it sounds like.
Yeah. And look, the other thing I will tell you with our current CEO, one of the traits about him that I really admire and try to emulate is courage. What he did to reposition AT&T took an incredible amount of courage. Look, he's a longtime AT&T executive, and upon being named CEO, he did a 180 on the previous strategy. That he was a critical member of the team in formulating, and he understood that the situation had changed, that we needed to do something different, and he did a 180. And he also took the really hard step of reducing the dividend, which also took an incredible amount of courage, because investors, that's one of the main reasons they invest in AT&T. But he knew that at the size of the dividend that it was, we were not going to be able to invest sufficiently in the business, and that upon his exit from the company, we would not have a company that is vibrant and healthy. And so he basically did what was right for the long-term well-being of AT&T, even though he knew it was going to cause him a lot of personal criticism.
Yeah, I mean, that's an amazing story. And, the part that amazes me, Pascal, is he was an insider.
He was.
Like a lot of times people recognize, okay, we need to redo this thing. So they bring in an outside CEO. And in a lot of cases, that is actually the right decision, right? Because it just, if you're sort of an AT&T lifer and say the entire business model needs to be reworked, that's, difficult to do. So, good for him for recognizing this is what I built. Now I need to change it, and not exactly doing a 180, but pretty close to it.
Yeah. So look, I've been really fortunate, Jack, to get to work with some of the greatest leaders in corporate America, and along the way, added tools to my toolkit in terms of the sort of behavior I want to be able to model.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. So one of the big things for CFOs, particularly first-time CFOs, and the majority of our listeners, we believe, are first-time CFOs, so is how do you build a relationship with the CEO? And from what you've shared here and just, from what I've gathered from, publicly available information, it seems like you and John have a true partnership, mutual respect. He is the CEO, so, it's a dynamic. But how did you build that relationship, or is that just something that came natural?
When AT&T acquired Time Warner, I fully expected that I was going to leave Time Warner and go off and do something else. I didn't expect to stay with AT&T. And John, to his credit, he said, look, I'm new to the media business. I would love for you to stay and help me get my arms around this for a period of time. And many of the Time Warner executives wanted no part of being a subsidiary of AT&T. Me, on the other hand, I said, look, I'm going to be constructive here. This is a great company, and I want to make sure that I position the company in the best possible way to succeed long-term, with or without. And I think John truly admired how constructive I was in helping him understand the soft spots in the business, what we need to be done. And at the same time, I was able to make, to tell him, look, here are the tough decisions that still need to be made. And he admired that objectivity. And ultimately, that's what got us to the point where we had a really great relationship. Similarly, I imparted on him the Time Warner businesses needed significant investment to reposition them because the business model was largely rooted in the legacy cable television ecosystem, and that it needed to be repositioned to go direct to consumer. And John, to his credit, significantly increased investment in content in order to allow the Time Warner businesses to go direct to consumer. So recognizing that he, at his core, is a builder of businesses and wanting to do what's right, not in the short term, but in the long term for the business, is something that very much made me want to continue to work with him.
No, that's fantastic because, give him credit for having the humility to say, I don't know enough about your industry and I need your expertise to help me do that. Talk about setting the partnership. And, I do believe that the CEO and the CFO is a true business partnership. Talk about setting the partnership off on favorable terms from day one, right? Just to be able to approach you like that.
Absolutely. Look, as a CFO, you are the person who needs to be willing and consistently able to tell the CEO, the board, and even employees what's not going well. And having the confidence to do that and having a CEO who can accept that message is so critically important in order for these partnerships to work. You are, as a CFO, you have to be comfortable not being Mr. Popular. and this is popular. You have to be comfortable in speaking truth to power. You have to be the advocate for the shareholders and make sure that the company is doing what's right by shareholders and at the same time giving them the information that they need to make investment decisions.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So cool. Well, I want to shift gears a little bit. And you've worked with some great teams throughout your career. And I just want to get an understanding of what's your philosophy and your approach to building world-class teams, not only within finance and accounting, but, the CFO today, it's an enterprise-wide job. You're not just siloed in finance and accounting like I was when I was a CFO. So do you have like a philosophy, some nuggets you can share with people when they're looking to create that type of company?
Yeah, I think it has to start with the humility to know that you don't know everything. And even within the company, you may not have the right skill sets to take the company to where you aspire for it to be. And having the humility and the awareness to recognize that is a key part of building great teams. So for me, I always start with, okay, if I have a position to fill, who is the best person on the planet to do this job that I think would be willing to do the job? And I don't limit myself to the people who are in front of me. I always start by saying, ideally, it would be great to have somebody who's in front of me that can do the job, but what the company deserves is the best possible person to do that job. And that's one. Two, maintain great networks. If you are good to people that you've worked with along the way, they will want to work for you again. They're going to recommend to their friends to work with you. And some of the best hires I've had over the years have been people who I either worked with before or people who said, hey, you want to work for him because he's an honest broker. He will tell you exactly what he thinks. He will be an advocate for you. He will tell you the hard messages that you need to hear in order to get better. And so that's another aspect of it, is really trying to make sure you keep your network vibrant and you always have an eye out for talent where you may have the need.
No, that makes a whole lot of sense. I think if people only take one thing from this podcast, if that's it, then that this would have been some valuable time.
One other thing, Jack, that I think is really important is, I alluded to it in my last answer, is providing feedback. We all have opportunities to get better, and providing feedback on how somebody needs to improve in order to get better is the best possible gift you can provide them. It allows them to be aware of an issue they may not have been aware of. And as importantly, if you're really good at it, you can also help them by giving them the tools they need to get better at it, whether it is participating in a class outside of work, whether it is building a specific skill set, suggesting a course for them to do that, or just working with them on it. I remember having one of my team members who was going to go present to the board the first time. What I did is I did 3 separate dry runs with them. I did it because I was really important for me that they were comfortable and that they were successful in putting their best foot forward.
So, wow, that's a boss everybody would like to work for. So, but I want to ask you a question, sort of related, but by reputation, and I think by fact, AT&T certainly is one of the companies that's leading the way on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I know that's important to you personally, but how have you, empowered people who are from historically underrepresented groups? And perhaps that's important to you since you're from a historically underrepresented group personally.
I think that's, awareness. It always starts with awareness. I always start from the standpoint, we all think we are 100% unbiased, when in reality, we are all 100% have some biases. And it's being aware of our biases and trying to put mechanisms to help overcome them. Things I've done in the past are things like having a diverse hiring slate. So when you're hiring for a key position, have other people involved that are of varied backgrounds, so that way you are not missing a skill that, because of your biases, you're not attuned to. To always ask, well, why not them? What are the gaps that they have that you think others don't have? And let's be clinical about it. Let's write down, what are the key attributes to do the job really well? And where are the gaps for each of the candidates?
Yeah, no.
Try to bring mechanisms to overcome the inherent biases that we all have. And look, I look at my team. I am so incredibly proud of the diversity represented at my table. And at the same time, I think in every single instance, I've actually got an upgrade relative to the prior, the incumbent. So it's really being able to be objective about it also helps you improve the overall quality of the team that you have.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. So AT&T, again, the last few years has been a transformation like you very rarely see in corporate America. But looking ahead, what are some of the biggest challenges and opportunities that are facing AT&T going forward?
Sure thing. Look, here is, let me start with first the challenges, because then they will lead right into the opportunities that I see. Right now, AT&T, in addition to being the largest fiber provider in the country, also has the largest legacy copper wireline. So think landline phones, fax machines, phones in an elevator. We are carrying infrastructure associated with both. There are regulatory reasons that make it slower than ideal to have that infrastructure remaining, but eliminating that infrastructure, and it's being eliminated gradually each and every day. But we fully expect over time to be out of that infrastructure, and not having to invest in that infrastructure to support our legacy footprint is an enormous opportunity. Also, we still haven't, much of our wireless distribution happens through national networks, national retail outlets. So in today's world, we have an opportunity to do a lot more direct fulfillment through digital channels. Not having physical infrastructure, not having to pay employees to man physical infrastructure, providing service in the way the customer really wants to. In today, there is a whole generation of consumers that only want to do things digitally. So we, as a business imperative, we have to make much more of our distribution through digital channels. That will open up enormous opportunities for us. And, look, I think AI is another enormous opportunity for us. You think about, we have, customers are calling in. Increasingly, we're able to service the customer through using voice recognition technology and AI, and it's only getting better and driving more efficiencies. It's improving customer service, and at the same time, it's driving enormous efficiencies for us as a company.
Wow, that's remarkable. And it's funny, I'm required as a podcaster, part of my license is that I do have to ask you about generative AI and technology generally, but how are you using it? You're probably using it the way a lot of companies are doing in the finance and accounting world and other groups, but how are you able to use it to really create sustainable long-term competitive advantages for the company?
I would tell you probably the biggest area. Let me start with AT&T overall, and then I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing in finance. AT&T overall, it's probably in the area of customer service. Despite the fact that we've grown our customer base enormously the last several years, the number of calls that are taken by humans has gone down dramatically as a result of using AI and now generative AI. We are also able to more efficiently route technician dispatches through the use of AI and machine learning. Another big area is software development. We have a lot of legacy platforms that need to be converted to modern code. Well, generative AI allows you to do that much more efficiently than we were able to do historically. Also, from a finance standpoint, my team oversees, customer credit and collection. So using AI to detect anomalies, fraud patterns, something that we have really driven much better credit decisions, much lower instances of fraud through the use of AI and machine learning. Real estate is one of the areas that falls underneath my purview. In real estate, we have thousands of leases. Using AI to summarize key lease terms and to identify potential opportunity concessions that are embedded in the lease without having to review them in detail. Enormous efficiencies. And Jack, I will tell you, we are in the very early innings of this, and over time, it will not only will the efficiencies grow, we will become much better at it. The level of sophistication and effectiveness will go up dramatically.
Yeah, it's a remarkable time to be alive.
It really is.
People 5 years from now are going to look at, what we're doing now and think it's like the most primitive thing that they could ever imagine, right? So
exactly.
Yeah. So just technologies, just this. I'd heard of AI, of course. In fact, years ago, I worked for a company that did a form of AI, but I just never imagined would have anything like this within my career, if not within my lifetime. And now we're going to dwarf that. So,
indeed.
Yeah, cool. So I want to ask you, one of the big challenges that, again, probably not someone at your level, but, the first-time CFOs, they're challenged with sort of making sure that the financial strategy and just the overall corporate strategy are aligned. It's almost like, back when I was a CFO, it was almost as if they were two different things in different silos. Not the greatest way to run the business, but that's the way it was back then. But how do you make sure that, the financial and strategic things are on the same page, and that finance supports the strategic direction, and the strategic direction is set with an understanding of the financial landscape?
Yeah, to me, it all starts with, what are we trying to accomplish as a firm? And what is the financial infrastructure necessary to accomplish that? How much investments do we need to have? How much contingency do we need to build in? Because you never know what uncertainty will beset the firm. So really, I think about, strategy and what you're trying to accomplish from a business standpoint should feed a rational financial strategy. The other thing that first-time CFOs, in addition to making sure that there is clear alignment between the strategy and the financial profile that you are architecting, it's really important that you are talking to each of the stakeholders in the same way. By stakeholders, I mean your outside shareholders and analysts, your board, your employees, and that the plans are all aligned. Because the only way you really drive efficiency and consistency and alignment is to have that complete alignment between the strategic plan and the financial plan, and constant communication of both is so critical.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. But still, it seems like it's intuitive, but it's an area that a lot of, people struggle with, right? That just not having them separately. And it used to be, financial planning was done on Excel spreadsheets, and it still is. I mean, Excel's an amazing tool, but you can't really run a business like AT&T on Microsoft Excel, I wouldn't think.
Absolutely. Look, the other thing too, along those lines, what's really important is for the CFO to have the courage of their conviction, and find their voice. in making sure that the key stakeholders understand that everything is about trade-offs, and that if we're investing heavy in this area, well, let's all agree we're going to have to find where we are funding that in another area. We can't do all things for all constituencies, and having the courage to state that out loud and to get the organization to rally behind you in order to accomplish that is so critically important.
Absolutely. That makes sense. So I want to ask a question about just the very nature of financial leadership. And, within the course of our career, it was kind of like I don't want to say backwards looking, but it was focused a lot on financial reporting, cost controls, compliance, and whatnot. And now it's truly a strategic, visionary type of role. But how do you see the role of the CFO in financial leadership generally changing going forward?
As a finance leader, as a CFO, you are the person who is talking to your ownership the most, more so than the CEO. They are the providers of your capital, making sure that they understand what you are trying to accomplish and that there is alignment, so that when, because there are things that you will do that don't work out. You want to be able to say, hey, I've been telling you, this is what we're trying. It didn't quite work out as we thought. Here's how we're course correcting. Being in the position to be able to really understand the strategy at an acute level and understand what are the key metrics that prove whether it is working or not, and sharing those broadly and often is such a critical part to making sure you are gaining the confidence of your stakeholders, because it all starts with the owners, whether it is your lenders, whether it's your equity owners. They have to have confidence in what you are doing and your ability to accomplish it. And then you have to rally the organization and hold everyone accountable for delivering for that external stakeholder. And I think that is probably the biggest adjustment that I know I had to make in becoming a public company CFO. And I think others will have to step up to, because you are the bridge between the outside world and the inside world. And it's critical that you speak to both in the same way, and that that you understand you are representing the owners.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And a lot of people in the media have shared with me, they actually like to get the story from the CFO more than any other executive in the company. And it's not slamming other people by any means, but it's more like you really want the unvarnished truth. There was a TV media guy who used to call it the no spin zone. I forget the fellow's name. I'm told I look like him though. But anyway, it was the no spin zone. But you're going to get that from the CFO. And, it's so critical that they be transparent and always act with high integrity, because that's what the world expects from you in a way that they don't necessarily expect from anyone else. So
absolutely. And it is, I always, to me, I work for the owners. I really do. Like, while John's my boss, I work for the owners. I am here to represent them, to make sure they are getting the information they need to make their decisions.
Yeah. I mean, Warren Buffett himself says that, right? It's like he said, I sometimes make decisions. I think of, grandparents who put their life savings in a company that I might be involved in. I want to make sure that they're having all the information they need to have to make a good decision for themselves. So, well, one question I want to ask you, and I actually wrote it down to make sure that I didn't leave anything out, but in addition to being a CFO of a highly visible, publicly traded company, you're on the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas Board of Directors. You're on the United Way of Metropolitan Dallas's Board of Directors, and you're on the Board of Trustees of Prep for Prep. And you're also a member of the University of Texas Southwestern President's Advisory Board. Work-life balance, and I can tell from looking at you that you're not skipping workouts. You're obviously in great shape. How do you do all of this and still find time to be a husband and father to two adult children as well?
Yeah, look, it takes a village. It really does. I think it starts with having a life partner who understands your goals and is supportive of your goals. My wife and I had been married 35 years. I have 2 adult children, so that young adult children, that makes it a little bit easier. And look, you have to make time for yourself. You have to make time to make sure you are doing the things that are necessary to keep you replenished, because in order for you to be at your very best and to give all that is required of you, you need to be fully replenished. And my relationship with my wife, my workout habits, my eating habits and sleeping habits are all part of the ingredients for making sure that I am ready to fulfill all the commitments that I have. And it really, that is the foundation. Without that, I can't be my best possible self if I'm not healthy, if I don't have energy, if my wife needs something and I'm not there for her. All things that are critical for me to do in order to be in a position to do my job.
Yeah, no, it's so important. And I tell people, look, if you won't do it for yourself, do it for your family. And if you won't do it for your family, if your career is the main thing, do it for your career. Because in the long run, you're not going to really flourish without exercising and a healthy diet. And look, you don't have to be running Ironman triathlons or doing that CrossFit stuff that's so challenging, but half an hour, 45 minutes, a few days a week, it makes a difference. So,
absolutely.
And I'm a big eater, so I would weigh 300 pounds if I didn't have time to do that. Healthy eater, but a big eater.
Likewise.
Cool. Well, I always like to conclude with advice that you may be willing to share with the next generation of CFOs. And I'm thinking those who were, in maybe their first job as a CFO, or even those who are 3 months to 2 years out from getting their first CFO job, things they ought to be thinking about.
Here is where I would start with making sure you are aware of your strengths and the areas where you need bolstering, and surround yourself with people who complement you, who can challenge you, who can make sure that you are considering everything that is necessary in order to make the best possible decisions. And I think sometimes that's not as intuitive as it should be, but you really do need a great team who will push you, who will say, no, I don't agree, and here's why. And the willingness and the courage to listen to them is probably the best piece of advice I could give to aspiring CFOs.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Well, Pascal, this has been a lot of fun and, a great.
Likewise.
Yeah. And, I know the listeners are going to really benefit from this. This is going to be the ones that people are going to listen to multiple times. But before we go, I just want to give you the final word. If there's any last thing you'd like to share.
Oh, look, I would just say to anybody who is an aspiring CFO, you've just got to go for it. Oftentimes we are afraid, what if we don't get the job? I would say, so what? Keep trying. In the end, if you are dogged about it and you do the work, you will get the opportunity.
That wraps up this episode of The Secrets of Rockstar CFOs. A huge thank you to our sponsors, Plantful and the CFO Leadership Council, for their amazing support. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and visit us at rockstarcfos.com. Until next time, rock on.
Thank you for listening to this episode. To continue your exploration of this role that focuses on strategy, leadership, finance, and technology, listen to more episodes of the show at rockstarcfos.com. Join this revolution, episode by episode. Push yourself to achieve great things and unlock the best opportunities available to you. CFOs are creating a legacy, and it's time for you to leave your own unique imprint on the world today. That's all for now. See you on the next one.